It was assumed she would be vulnerable, simply another black woman living alone. What they failed to realize was that she had support monitoring their every action. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday, late morning. This was a time when most people were at work or running errands. However, in Roseville, California, early retirement and home offices meant that people observed everything. And someone was already observing from across the street before the lift gate even touched the driveway. Rochelle Carrington, age 42, stood beside her black SUV, a clipboard held in her hand, offering the movers hushed directions. She was tall, with a self-assured stance and a tranquil gaze, moving with the grace of someone who conserved her energy. Her attire consisted of jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved t-shirt, marked with a small breakfast stain, a detail she disregarded. This was not a display of style. It was the beginning of a new phase in her life. She had finalized the purchase of the two-story home just 1 month earlier. It featured a Spanish tile roof, beige stucco, and neatly trimmed hedges. This was a place that declared, "I built this." And she had, though not as her neighbors imagined. The first visitor was a tall man wearing khaki shorts and a golf cap. He identified himself as Douglas Varnell, the head of the HOA. His handshake was brief and impersonal, and he avoided eye contact. "Are you moving in by yourself?" he inquired, observing the security camera boxes near the front door. "No, not everyone is here yet." "Well, if you need anything, we maintain order here," Douglas stated, briefly looking at the SUV before departing without acknowledging her. She observed him vanish behind his hedges. By sundown, Rochelle had unpacked sufficiently to consider the space habitable. Her home office was established, blinds were in place, and the kitchen was supplied. There were no signs, no music, and no boisterous visitors. Only her. Some plants adorned the porch, and a single folding chair was present. The following morning, a note was slid beneath her doormat. Reminder: all porch decor must adhere to HOA regulations. Flags, religious items, and political messages are prohibited. No name, no signature, just that. She chuckled. She didn't have a flag displayed, only a hand-painted ceramic sun her niece created in art class. It was hung askew beside the door. That afternoon, while adjusting her mailbox height, as the HOA had noted it was non-uniform, she observed a woman in yoga pants walking her dog slowly past her house. The dog paused, sniffing the grass, and the woman's gaze lingered a moment too long. "You new here?" the woman asked. "Looks like it," Rochelle responded, straightening. The woman offered a strained smile. "Well, the HOA is quite particular. It helps maintain the appearance of the neighborhood." "I'm familiar with the guidelines," Rochelle stated. The woman chuckled, but the sound lacked warmth. "That's good. We value a specific aesthetic for our neighborhood." The implication was unmistakable. Unbeknownst to them, beyond any prediction they could make, she had done more than simply read their book. She had studied classified briefing reports capable of disconcerting a senator. She had overcome language barriers, handled explosives, and participated in clandestine negotiations in countries she couldn't disclose. A neighborhood association would not deter her. Nonetheless, something felt amiss. She had relocated frequently, new towns, new cities, but the welcome felt staged. A forced pleasantness, conversations tinged with observation. Consequently, she installed the cameras, not out of suspicion, but out of readiness. One positioned above the door, another at the side entrance, and two angled in the front yard, addressing areas overlooked by most. That night, she stood on her porch with a glass of water, observing the street lights activate. A breeze rustled the leaves, and a lone car passed slowly, increasing its speed once it cleared her driveway. She felt no immediate danger, but also lacked a sense of ease. She dispatched a brief message from a disposable phone to a contact listed as Deb's Plumbing. Message content: settle incomplete. Activity already odd. Logging first flags. Standby. There was no response. She didn't require one. However, despite the stillness of that first week, Rachel sensed that the tranquility wouldn't persist for long. Within the second week, a subtle unease began to develop. The first sign was a formal notification affixed to her mailbox concerning parking regulations. The notice stated, "Driveway must be kept clear of oversized vehicles. Please use garage for storage." Her SUV was properly positioned, not obstructing pedestrian access, not encroaching on a neighbor's property, and it accommodated comfortably within the driveway. She removed the notice and placed it in the recycling bin. The following day, an unfamiliar man stood at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed, observing her as she watered the succulents in front of her bay window. "Hello," she called out. He remained silent, simply staring, before slowly walking away. That night, a second note appeared, printed entirely in capital letters. It read, "No unauthorized vehicles. Surveillance is active. HOA monitors street traffic." Surveillance. The irony caused her to laugh. She reviewed the surrounding area once more. Everything appeared normal, with the exception of a mounting feeling that someone, or multiple individuals, disapproved of her presence. Several days passed, and then the police arrived. It was shortly after 6 p.m. golden sunlight illuminating the porch. A patrol car stopped and parked directly in front of her home. Two officers, courteous but formal, approached. "Ma'am, we received a call regarding a disturbance," one of them stated. "Reports of loud arguing." She blinked. "I reside alone. Are there any visitors this evening?" "No. You are welcome to verify." They did not enter, but they recorded a few observations and then departed. 15 minutes elapsed before she observed Douglas Varnell once more. Identical khaki shorts, same gait. He did not approach the door this time, merely stood close to his mailbox, engaged in conversation with a woman in yoga pants. Both glanced towards her. Rachel opened her front door and stepped outside, signaling that she was aware of their presence. Douglas nodded once. "Just checking to ensure everything is all right over there," he called out. "I'm all right," she responded. "Good, the police visit when things don't conform to the regulations. Noise complaints, misuse of property. I pay the same fees as everyone else," she stated calmly. He raised his eyebrows, seeming to consider that a provocation, and then returned to his messaging. Later that week, the trash collection bypassed her house completely. While every other container on the street was serviced by sunrise, hers remained uncollected. She contacted the sanitation department. There was no record of a missed pickup request, they stated. "This might seem unusual," she commented, "but is it possible someone reported my house as vacant?" The woman speaking on the phone hesitated briefly. "Indeed, yes. That's what appears in the notes." Rachel took a slow, deliberate breath. "I reside here. We will resolve this." She ended the call and returned to her porch, holding her phone, the camera light blinking gently above. That evening, her back fence gate was discovered slightly open. Not fully, but enough to indicate someone had attempted to open it. The lock still engaged when she tested it, but the chain showed a new abrasion, as if it had been pulled. This was sufficient for her. She accessed the encrypted tablet she kept in a locked drawer in her home office and started a low-level alert. Possible harassment escalation. Passive monitoring began. Authorization to activate detail. Moments later, a reply. Authorization approved. Detail shifting from secondary to active. Karina Bell had lived 2 doors down for years. She was a retired postal worker who enjoyed begonias and frequently discussed her knees, seemingly avoiding conversations about politics. However, the residents of Briar Hollow Court were unaware that Karina had previously worked in logistics within international security, a confidential role originating from Langley many years prior. She was indebted to Rachel, a significant debt. That favor had now been requested. The following morning, Karina arrived at Rachel's door, presenting a basket of muffins and a quiet smile. She mentioned she thought you might appreciate some company, Rachel said. Rachel agreed and moved out of the way. "I'm assuming you're not simply visiting?" Karina asked, drawing closer. "I'm already diverting 2 drones away from your land. The homeowners association isn't your sole concern." Before Rachel could inquire about her meaning, a knock sounded at the door. And this time, it wasn't Karina with baked goods. It was 4:42 p.m. when they arrived, not in a squad car, not in a designated homeowners association vehicle. A silver sedan, notable for a cracked front headlight and excessively tinted windows, pulled up. Two men exited the vehicle. They wore khaki pants and tucked-in polo shirts, each with laminated badges attached to their belts, badges that appeared cheaply made. One held a clipboard. The other feigned taking photographs of her yard with a phone. Rachel recognized this pattern. She had witnessed similar encounters previously, not in the suburbs, but in Havana, in Berlin, and in Port-au-Prince. The imposter, the bullying tactic, the unauthorized figure who falters when challenged. She unlocked her door before they even reached it. Karina remained inside, seated peacefully on the living room couch, enjoying tea as if it were a typical Wednesday. "You must be Miss Carrington, the one with the clipboard," she stated, her tone dripping with false sweetness and a sense of superiority. "We're with the Briar Hollow HOA Enforcement Committee. We have a few items to discuss with you." Rachel rested against the doorframe. "Your badges are not scanning. You are not listed in the directory, and the HOA does not conduct in-person visits without a 72-hour notice." The man blinked, surprised she didn't react. "Ma'am," he said, adjusting his tone, "your porch has items that are not permitted, and we're receiving multiple complaints regarding frequent visitors." "Is that against the rules?" she asked, remaining still. The second man advanced. "We require you to step outside. We want to review the violations with you." "No, thank you." The first man's smile disappeared. "We're simply attempting to assist you in preventing fines. This situation could worsen." "I find that unlikely." They shared a glance. Then the expression changed. Without speaking, they moved quickly. One attempted to grasp her arm. The other reached for the screen door. Karina reacted before they made contact. "Back away," she stated firmly, moving with a skill unexpected of a retiree. Her phone was already in her hand, her thumb activating a sequence other than calling 911. "Who the hell are you?" one of the men demanded. "Back up," Karina said. The man pulled the door open forcefully. Rachel remained still. She didn't cry out. She didn't retaliate. She turned a little and pressed her hand down firmly on his wrist, securing her grip with her thumb tucked in and her elbow bent. It was a precise maneuver learned from her training. The man swore, taking a step back. "Enough," Rachel said softly. They weren't prepared for that. The second man recovered quickly. He moved forward again, but the sound of tires on gravel caused all three to stop. Two dark SUVs entered the street. There were no sirens, no lights, and no identifying markings, only a calm, consistent approach. The men glanced back, attempting to assess the situation. "You can run," Rachel stated, "but it will be more difficult." The men remained still. One appeared to be breathing heavily, while the other attempted to appear composed. Shortly after, both SUVs stopped. Four people emerged, two from each vehicle, dressed in ordinary clothing and wearing sunglasses, with no visible weapons. They proceeded together, swiftly and effectively. The individual holding the phone attempted to flee. He managed 6 feet before being restrained, with his arm twisted behind his back and his phone sliding across the pavement. The person with the clipboard made no attempt to resist. He simply sat down on the porch step, as if his confidence had been abruptly removed. One of the agents, a slender man with graying hair, addressed Rachel. "Miss Carrington, are you all right?" She affirmed her well-being. Minimal physical contact. No injuries were sustained. The camera recorded the entire incident. "Excellent," he stated, then turned to Karina. Karina shrugged, acknowledging the notification. The timing felt correct. Within 10 minutes, the two individuals posing as law enforcement officers were secured, their identities confirmed, and they were positioned on the curb, resembling reprimanded children. Residents started observing from behind curtains. Several opened garage doors and lingered in the darkness, feigning sweeping activities. No one intervened. Even Douglas Varnell, the taller of the two men, now in handcuffs, finally spoke. "We were just trying to make sure the neighborhood stayed safe." "From what?" Rachel inquired. He remained silent, but his eyes' movement towards the Douglas Varnell house indicated his intentions clearly. The other man's gaze directed at Douglas Varnell's house was observed. It wasn't missed by Rachel. It wasn't missed by the agents. It wasn't even missed by Karina, who now stood quietly beside the porch steps, arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the street as if observing a chessboard illuminate. An agent, a woman in her late 30s with a distinct New Jersey accent, overheard the interaction. She gave a single nod to her colleague and walked along the sidewalk towards Douglas's front door. He did not respond to the knock. Shortly after, the agent requested a second team. There were no sirens, only unmarked vehicles as previously. It was a display of clean, cold, silent efficiency. By this time, several more neighbors had emerged, remaining close to mailboxes and speaking quietly among themselves. None of them moved closer to the house. Rachel remained seated on her porch, still and observant, watching the events transpire. Karina stood beside her, a hand gently touching the porch rail. He never was that bright, Karina murmured. You know him? Rachel inquired. Not personally, but I've been observing his cameras for weeks. Rachel lifted an eyebrow. The ones he stated were for wildlife? Yes. It was peculiar how the wildlife seemed to resemble women walking their dogs or brown children on bicycles. The clipboard guy was escorted into one of the SUVs. The other individual, identified as Ronan Kessler, had a sealed juvenile record and resided just outside city limits. Both were hired laborers, not residents. However, their paychecks provided a lead. One of the agents returned to the porch, crouching to Rachel's eye level. We are currently reviewing surveillance footage. Your neighbor across the street has cameras. We are obtaining access through municipal override. The agent paused. Do you think he is connected? I believe whoever is orchestrating this considered you an easy target. Rachel gazed across the street. Douglas's front window blinds were now closed completely. You're going to find this surprising, the agent stated. Situations like this, they occur more frequently than one might assume. Fabricated HOAs, independent residents, private contractors, all operating discreetly. However, they selected the incorrect address this time. Karina quietly laughed. Absolutely. An hour elapsed, and the federal agents possessed sufficient evidence to knock on Douglas's door. This time he responded. Rachel didn't hear everything that was said, but she observed his expression when he understood this extended beyond a local matter. He was questioned about payments routed through a shell company, the number of anonymous police calls he had recorded from his residence, the fabricated notices, and the bogus HOA violations. He attempted to dismiss the inquiries. He supposedly stated, just doing my part to keep things orderly. However, order wasn't the core issue. The problem wasn't about porch decorations or SUVs. The difficulty arose because someone such as Rachel Carrington, given her measured actions and unwavering composure, undermined the sense of authority some residents valued in areas like this. They were unaccustomed to someone who didn't require their validation. Now, each of their methods had been recorded, the timing noted, and data compared. Returning to the porch, Karina moved nearer. Are you all right? I'm fine, Rachel replied. But I'm weary of this routine. Karina offered a slight smile. Perhaps a rewrite is in order. By evening, news had circulated. 2 arrests were made, a federal investigation commenced, and a request for voluntary interviews was sent to several homeowners on the block. Remarkably, no one questioned how Rachel had reacted so swiftly or why tactical agents had arrived in less than 10 minutes. They were unaware of the agency clearance, the debt of gratitude, or the discreet surveillance that had been ongoing for the past 5 weeks. Most importantly, they didn't realize who they were confronting as what seemed like a simple removal became a public event. Now, it was impossible to ignore what lay hidden just below the surface. By the next morning, the neighborhood felt shaken. It was evident in the closed garage doors, in the disrupted routines of morning walkers, and even the talkative couple on the corner remained silent. The normal pace was broken, and everyone understood the reason. Rachel was on her porch once more, holding coffee and with one leg crossed. There was no music, no book, only observation. She had experienced observation previously, in locations where a smile directed at the incorrect individual could result in detention. However, here in Roseville, the interactions followed a subtle understanding. Neighborhood expectations, community principles, safety anxieties, harassment disguised in a cardigan. Karina approached mid-morning, a file held beneath her arm. She remained silent until she was seated. They were digging deeper than I thought, she said. We caught 3 more devices near your yard, hidden in sprinkler heads. Rachel blinked. They planted audio? Worse, motion sensors, thermal reads. Somebody was building a case for something, or pretending to, from across the street. Another neighbor, an older woman named Leanne Price, peered through her curtains. This time, she didn't flinch when their eyes met. She was the one who called the cops on you. Twice, Rachel said quietly. Karina refrained from questioning how he possessed that information. Later that afternoon, a federal vehicle made a return visit, this time carrying official documents, subpoenas. The investigation had broadened. An examination of Douglas Varnell's finances uncovered a series of payments directed to private neighborhood enforcement agents working through a business named Civic Harmony Consultants, LLC. Their actions extended beyond simply fabricating HOA credentials. They were components of a loosely structured system designed to instill intimidation. This operation wasn't recent, nor was it particularly well concealed. The matter simply hadn't faced scrutiny before. Until now. Now, with a formal federal document involved, it was receiving serious consideration. A representative from the HOA board arrived later that day, appearing distressed. A quiet woman, Marisol Dupree, holding a notepad and offering apologies frequently. We weren't aware, Miss Carrington, she said. Douglas managed all enforcement concerns. We hadn't authorized any personal visits. He informed me you had, Rachel said. Marisol averted her gaze. I am truly sorry. Please don't apologize. Rachel emphasized the need for transparency, stating, let people know what happened. We will. Before Marisol departed, she hesitated at the foot of the porch steps. If it means anything, we're grateful you didn't retaliate, that you remained calm. Rachel responded, I didn't remain calm. I remained prepared. News of the incident spread beyond the cul-de-sac. By the weekend, a local news van arrived. The reporter did not make contact, simply filming discreetly from a distance until federal agents requested they depart. The incident was already gaining traction online. A recording from a neighbor's Ring camera captured a portion of the confrontation, including the fake HOA badge, the shouting, and the takedown. When the clip appeared on social media, it ignited widespread anger. This wasn't solely due to what occurred with Rachel, but also because the situation resonated with many. Messages flooded in from across the country. One person shared, "This happened to my dad in Austin." Another recounted a similar experience in Phoenix, noting that the police sided with the HOA. The pattern of individuals wielding rules as a tool, it's a genuine problem. The streets of Roseville became a subject of discussion, not due to their well-maintained lawns or excellent school ratings, but because of what occurs when private power believes it can operate without accountability. Later that night, Karina brought over 2 glasses of wine. The sun had set. The porch light hummed gently above them. You thinking about moving? She asked. No, Rachel said. Not yet. Karina nodded. Good, because it's different now. They know someone's observing from a distance, but the significant change wasn't among the neighbors. The realization dawned on Rachel. She understood how silence allowed them to operate and how a carefully chosen reply could effectively halt that activity. 2 days elapsed before a discreet meeting occurred at an unremarkable building close to the Sacramento Municipal Complex. There was no media coverage, no sensational announcements. Simply a table, 4 chairs, and 3 individuals who possessed a true understanding of how things functioned. Rachel was positioned at the far end, wearing all black and with a manila folder placed before her. Directly facing her was Agent Colin Braddock, the lead investigator for the now-active federal inquiry into Civic Harmony Consultants. A DHS cybersecurity representative sat to his left, their expression unreadable. Karina was positioned on Rachel's right, maintaining her usual composure. What you're dealing with, Braddock began, extends beyond this HOA, or even this neighborhood. The group you identified? They have been operating in clusters across several western states. Rachel acknowledged this with a nod. They exploit delayed accountability, focusing on local homeowners associations, retirement communities, and gated suburbs. Braddock indicated a tablet. They create a facade of authority, use regulations as weapons, and target individuals who don't conform, typically those with out-of-state license plates or who appear different, particularly if they move in without drawing attention. They went beyond establishing a false authority, Karina stated. They were collecting information. The DHS representative looked up. Your residence had passive thermal tags. That is not homeowners association technology. It's surplus military-grade equipment. Braddock leaned forward. Here's the part you're likely to find concerning. He indicated a flag communication from 6 months ago. One of our side channels detected it, but it wasn't initially prioritized. He slid the document across the table, a printout of an encrypted email chain with the subject line, New resident, confirmed background, CIA link. Rachel read it silently. Someone was investigating me before I even closed escrow. We believe so, Braddock stated. While they weren't entirely sure of your identity, their discomfort was evident, and the harassment began swiftly. It was a probing of limits. And if I had strongly opposed it, she mentioned they would portray me as the instigator. He confirmed this. It's a recognizable sequence. They instigate reactions, then amplify the pressure. They deliberately accumulate records to suggest instability. Karina added, they've underestimated this individual. Braddock offered a knowing smile. That's the consensus we've been receiving. This extended beyond individual grievances it always had. The situation Rachel encountered wasn't a simple dispute between neighbors. It was interwoven within a broader structure that relied on unspoken agreements. Following the meeting, as they headed to the car, Karina questioned the outcome. Do you believe this will hold now? With the charges and the exposure? Rachel responded, they'll suppress some of it, shielding the homeowners. Details will be concealed. But someone is observing now. It's no longer hidden. That evening, back at home, she retrieved a long untouched, dusty photo album from her bedroom closet. The album contained pictures from past projects, some with unclear faces, and others cut from international newspapers. Among them was a faded photograph of her mother standing in front of their house in Paterson, New Jersey, during the time a neighbor attempted to initiate eviction proceedings due to a zoning issue. She had resisted, steadfastly, and ultimately prevailed. That determination persisted. As dusk settled, Rachel stepped onto her porch once more. This time, she wasn't alone. Several neighbors, those who had previously avoided her, were walking dogs, watering plants, and acting as if they didn't notice her. A man across the street offered a small wave. She made no response. Not yet. She settled, crossed her arms, and gazed out at the cul-de-sac she now perceived distinctly. Not as a haven, but as a reflection. I used to think I could simply buy peace, she said aloud. Karina, having returned, responded while looking at her phone. You still can. It simply costs more than many anticipate. They remained in silence for a considerable time. Within the building, the cameras continued to record events. This wasn't due to an expectation of further incidents, but because detailed records were now essential for safety. Although the immediate danger seemed to have subsided, Rachel understood that the situation wasn't resolved. True success wasn't achieved through a single apprehension or a single exposure. It was about refusing to allow herself to diminish. A week later, the neighborhood had resumed its familiar routine. Lawn services were operating again, and children were riding their bikes. However, a palpable sense of caution lingered, particularly near the Carrington house. Some people offered waves, others deliberately avoided looking. A few seemed to desire an apology, but lacked the words to express it. Rachel didn't wait for them to decide what to do. Each morning, she worked from her home office. Her evenings were spent tending to the garden, which she had neglected since moving to Meadow Creek. She began walking around the neighborhood again, not out of obligation, but because she was able. Influence wasn't solely about defense. It was about existing openly without needing authorization. Karina arrived one evening, carrying a folded lawn chair and a chilled bottle of mineral water. I thought I'd keep you company, she said. They sat quietly for a while, observing the sky transform into a gentle orange hue. "I've been thinking," Karina stated. "Why do you think they were so bold? I mean, they didn't know who you were. But still, they didn't need to know." Rachel responded. "They just assumed I wouldn't fight back." Karina nodded. "Because most people don't. Because most people can't." They paused, letting the observation linger. It was an accurate assessment. Not everyone has a federal contact on speed dial. Not everyone has decades of tactical training. Not everyone has a Corina 2 doors down. And that's the point. The situation in Roseville extended beyond mere bias or intimidation. It involved a framework that facilitated individuals acting as gatekeepers, cloaking themselves in manufactured authority, fabricated concern, and deceptive neighborly gestures. They had established a functioning system. This system persisted until someone disrupted the established pattern. Afterward that evening, Rachel composed a letter at her desk. The letter was not addressed to the HOA, nor to her neighbors, but to a young woman she had yet to meet, someone who would eventually confront a similar circumstance. She wrote, "Don't wait for permission to have space. Claim it, subtly if possible, forcefully if necessary. Expect resistance. But remember, they consistently underestimate what they don't comprehend. Retain records, maintain composure, and most importantly, remain present, even when they desire your absence." She folded the paper, placed it within a journal, and slid it onto a shelf beside her badge. Not an award, not a recollection, a prompt, because this extended beyond a porch or a fence or a neighborhood rulebook. The narrative explored the lengths individuals would take to safeguard their perceived reality, and how swiftly that perception crumbled when someone asserted themselves and resisted conformity. The following Sunday, a community announcement circulated detailing a town hall meeting intended to rebuild faith and openness regarding neighborhood regulations. Douglas Varnell's name was discreetly eliminated from all HOA documentation. There was no formal justification provided. Rachel wasn't invited. However, she attended regardless. She positioned herself in the back row, remained silent, and simply listened, not to the spoken words. Regarding the atmosphere, however, the hesitant coughs, the measured language, the alteration in stance upon noticing her presence. Later, as she departed, Leanne Price approached her. "I wasn't aware the situation escalated to that degree," she remarked, adjusting her handbag strap. "We simply sensed something was amiss." "What was amiss?" Rachel inquired. Leanne paused. "I suppose I hadn't anticipated you would be so ready. I didn't anticipate needing to be." They remained there briefly. Then Leanne gave a short nod and walked off. This wasn't reconciliation, but it signaled the beginning of a reckoning. That night, Rachel posted a single sentence on her infrequently used social media account. "Politeness won't save you, but preparedness might." It quickly became widespread within days. People were no longer simply observing the drama. They were recognizing the underlying pattern, and perhaps, just perhaps, understanding it was time to disrupt it. So if you've reached this point, keep this in mind. Resilience isn't always about direct action. It can be found in a chair on a porch. It can be seen in a camera angled perfectly. It can be heard in a voice that remains strong. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe. Someone else out there needs to experience it as well. A judge publicly fined her concerning a small cross necklace, believing she was simply another person present. However, when she rose and spoke, the entire courtroom became quiet, and the subsequent events left even the bailiff astonished. Alana Merriweather did not go to the Rutherford County Courthouse, anticipating conflict. She went to support her younger cousin, Deshawn, who'd been arrested following a routine traffic stop that had escalated into a considerably larger matter. She requested a day of leave from work, chose a navy blue blouse, slacks, and flats. The outfit was simple and understated, yet respectful. A delicate gold chain with a small cross hung around her neck. It was not ostentatious, barely noticeable unless one looked closely. Someone did notice. The courtroom was full. It contained people awaiting their turns, lawyers reviewing documents, and deputies positioned along the walls. Alana settled into the second row, remaining quiet and composed. Her purse rested in her lap. She nodded softly to her cousin, who appeared exhausted from stress, his eyes weighed down by fatigue. He remained silent, offering her a look of thanks. That was sufficient. Judge Raymond Keller entered with his characteristic formal walk. The judge was known for a particular demeanor. Across Murfreesboro and in surrounding areas, lawyers spoke of his meticulous nature, traditional, direct, and unyielding. A Vietnam veteran who transitioned to a legal career, he regarded the courtroom as a space of great importance. His space. The bailiff called the room to order. Before proceeding, Judge Keller addressed the room, looking at the attendees as he said, "I'd like to address a matter of decorum." He looked directly at Alana. "You, ma'am, the one in blue. Please rise." Alana blinked, surprised, and slowly stood. Her heart thudded a little faster, but she kept her posture straight. "You're wearing a religious symbol," he said, his voice firm. "That's not permitted in my courtroom. Neutrality matters here." A fine of $50 was levied for disrupting court decorum. The room fell silent. Some individuals adjusted in their seats. Others averted their gaze, visibly uncomfortable. Alana did not respond immediately. She was familiar with being publicly singled out, questioned, and dismissed, yet she still felt surprised. A fine? For wearing a necklace? She glanced at the bailiff, then back to the judge. "Your Honor," she stated calmly, "is this a published policy? Could you please direct me to the statute or court rule that permits that penalty?" Keller showed no visible reaction. "This is my courtroom. I established the procedures." Alana nodded thoughtfully. "I comprehend that, sir. However, are those procedures documented anywhere?" He fixed his gaze on her for a brief moment. "You may pay the fine at the clerk's desk, or you may depart." She detected a quiet intake of breath from someone seated behind her. Alana remained still. She did not speak louder. She did not engage in debate. She merely inclined her head slightly and stated, "I am not leaving." A gentleman in the front row, an older man wearing a tan suit, lifted his eyebrow. His gaze moved from her to Judge Keller and back again. Judge Keller slowly straightened his robe. "Then you will be held in contempt?" The bailiff subtly changed his stance. The prosecutor set aside his file. A palpable change occurred. The atmosphere felt denser, not with theatrics, but with focused concentration. Alana released a single breath through her nose. "I'm here to support my cousin, Deshaun Grissom. The charges are being formally presented today, and he requested my presence. I'm not intending to cause any disturbance, Your Honor. However, I contend that this fine is not only unjust, but potentially unlawful." Judge Keller moved forward a little. "Did you question my jurisdiction?" Her expression remained unchanged. "I am requesting an explanation of the policy and its legal basis." He hesitated briefly. It was slight, almost unnoticeable, but the pause was present. He did not anticipate that. "Who are you?" he inquired, his voice growing tense. "My name is Alana Meriwether," she replied, "and I'm a constitutional attorney licensed in 3 states, including Tennessee." The courtroom cracked open. You could almost feel the collective intake of breath. Someone whispered under their breath, "Damn." She continued, measured and composed, "I graduated from Harvard Law School in 2010. I've worked for the Southern Center for Human Rights, and I currently serve as senior counsel at a nonprofit based in Memphis. I am present as a family member, but I understand the law, and I am aware of my rights." Keller relaxed back in his chair. For the first time, he appeared uneasy, not angry, simply unsteady. She could have smiled. She refrained. The ensuing silence was palpable. The judge began to speak, but stopped, instead rearranging the papers on his desk. However, the judge was unaware of who he was addressing. Alana did not grow up with wealth. She was raised in Jackson, Mississippi, in a faded brick duplex off of Robinson Road. Denise, her mother, held overnight shifts at the Willow Creek nursing home, and her father left when she was 8. Resources were scarce, but a set of principles guided them. Speak with clarity. Avoid minimizing your worth. Assert yourself when injustice occurs, but maintain composure and a dignified demeanor. By the age of 16, Alana had studied the Constitution from beginning to end on 2 separate occasions. She sought to comprehend the disparate treatment experienced by individuals like herself in courtrooms, offices, stores, and even churches. Her motivation wasn't anger, but rather a genuine curiosity. There was also a deeper element at play, a quiet determination. People consistently underestimated her, not only due to her brown skin or her choice to wear her hair natural, but also in subtle ways, like overlooking her in meetings. She remembered the way older male attorneys would address her as young lady, within rooms filled with men experiencing thinning hair and fragile egos. She quickly understood that possessing brilliance was insufficient. There were times when it needed to be carried quietly, allowing them to believe they were more astute, until they unwittingly stepped into a carefully constructed plan. When Alana was accepted into Harvard Law, it felt less like a joyous occasion and more like a validation. She had previously informed her high school counselor that her aspiration was to become a civil rights attorney. A genuine laugh escaped her. Then, she cautioned that law school presented fierce competition and wasn't necessarily a viable option. Alana remained silent. She simply intensified her studies. While attending Harvard, she wasn't boisterous. She found no need to be. She consistently occupied the front row of each constitutional law class, rapidly taking notes and posing questions that caused professors to pause. People began to observe her, yet still regarded her as unusual. This perception never felt satisfactory to her. After graduating, she declined 2 offers from large firms seeking impactful work. She spent several years in Alabama, defending minors within the legal system. Then, she moved to Memphis to join a nonprofit dedicated to combating housing discrimination. While she didn't gain widespread recognition, her work secured people's release from jail and kept families in their homes, transforming lives. Throughout this, she consistently wore her small gold cross, a deeply personal symbol. The brooch had been her grandmother's, accompanied by a handwritten note. It read, "Wear this when you need to be reminded you're not alone." Her grandmother never removed it. Not once. Not even in court. Therefore, when Judge Keller singled her out, calling her out as if she were a disruptive teenager in detention, it didn't unsettle her. It evoked memories of the instances she's experienced being looked at and not truly seen. They never anticipated her. They anticipated the boisterous one, the angry one. There was someone poised to lash out or leave abruptly. Instead, they experienced something else entirely, a demonstration of precision, control, and strength through composure. This wasn't unprecedented. In 2017, within a courtroom in Little Rock, she observed a public defender struggle during a bail hearing. The judge seemed disengaged. The defendant, a 19-year-old facing trespassing charges at an abandoned building, was on the verge of being assigned $1,500 bail, an amount he was unlikely to afford. Alana rose, introduced herself, and referenced 3 Arkansas statutes that the judge seemed to have missed. The judge conceded. Bail was waived. The defendant was released that same day. That demonstrated her character. Consequently, sitting in Rutherford County, facing a fine for a necklace of great personal significance, before a judge who believed he could compel her to be silent, Alana remained steadfast. She straightened her posture. When she introduced herself to the courtroom, her name, her qualifications, her purpose for being present, it wasn't intended for Judge Keller. It was directed toward everyone who perceived her as simply someone's relative. However, today wasn't a day when silence was an option. The courtroom remained quiet for an unusually long time. Judge Keller shuffled papers, seemingly stalling. But Alana remained still, her hands clasped before her, patiently waiting. Not contesting, merely waiting. From the far corner, the prosecutor subtly adjusted his posture, his fingers still. The bailiff's gaze moved between Keller and Alana. A change was palpable. The room's power dynamic had altered. It wasn't solely emanating from the bench. Keller spoke, clearing his throat. "This court will proceed with the next case." He refrained from mentioning the fine again, at least for now. However, the absence of his usual reprimand was keenly observed. Deshawn's case was then called. He remained standing, still wearing the wrinkled button-down shirt from county lockup. He looked at Alana. his eyes reflecting both pride and concern. She offered him a singular, composed glance, a look conveying, "Don't panic. I've got this." The public defender approached the table. However, before he could speak, Alana moved forward. "Your Honor," she stated distinctly, "with the court's permission, I would like to represent Mr. Grissom today. I've reviewed the charges and spoken with him. He desires me to stand in his defense." Judge Keller looked up. "You aren't listed as counsel. I presented my bar card. My Tennessee license is current. You can verify with the Board of Professional Responsibility I am listed as Alana Joy Merriweather." He paused a moment too long and then nodded once. "Proceed." Alana moved to stand beside Deshawn. Her cousin appeared to want to laugh and cry simultaneously. She placed one hand gently on his shoulder as she turned to address the court. Mr. Grissom was stopped due to a non-functioning tail light. The arrest report indicates he was asked to leave the vehicle and subjected to a search without consent. No warrant was present. The officer's statement made no mention of probable cause. Additionally, the encounter progressed to resisting arrest when he inquired about the reason for being handcuffed. He did not raise his voice, nor did he threaten anyone. She retrieved a document from her purse. "I've submitted a written motion to dismiss, supported by 3 Tennessee Supreme Court rulings. Each affirms that a warrantless search under these circumstances constitutes a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Additionally, the resisting arrest charge lacks supporting video evidence, despite officers wearing department-issued body cams." The room was still again. Alana frowned, leaned back, and accepted the motion from the clerk. He reviewed it. It was evident. With a rapid scan of the room and a slight twitch of his jaw, Alana remained silent. She stood motionless, allowing him to read, while ensuring her presence was undeniable. Behind her, people subtly adjusted their positions, not from disinterest, but from focused attention. This was no longer the woman they believed was in distress just moments prior. This was a different person altogether. Judge Keller looked up. "You wrote this motion yourself?" "I did. I prepared this draft last night following a review of the police report and a conversation regarding the arrest with Mr. Grissom, and I am not affiliated with a law firm. I am employed by a civil rights nonprofit. Our organization focuses on due process violations, housing discrimination, and wrongful convictions." The judge tapped the motion lightly on the desk. "Your client's record? No prior arrests. No violent offenses. He's a full-time electrician's apprentice, simply trying to get to work on time the day this occurred." Another long silence. Keller turned to the prosecutor. "State's position?" The prosecutor paused. "We'd be willing to dismiss the resisting charge, maintain the traffic infraction." Alana spoke again, her voice resolute. "We'd agree to that only with the court confirmation that the search was unlawful. Mr. Grissom deserves that documented. It was a confident move. No apologies. No hesitation. Simply a direct, justifiable request supported by legal precedent." Keller observed her. The courtroom rarely witnessed such assertiveness. A woman, a black woman, effortlessly navigating legal procedures. She did so without displaying anger or arrogance, simply presenting clear and precise facts. He adjusted his glasses. The motion to dismiss was granted. The traffic infraction remains with a warning, and no fines will be assessed. Alana offered a subtle nod, devoid of a smile or celebratory gestures. She then turned to Deshawn. "You're free to go." He paused momentarily, as if his body needed time to process the news. Subsequently, he left the defendant's table and embraced her firmly. A murmur rippled through the courtroom once more. It wasn't regarding the case itself, but about her. However, what Alana did next silenced everyone. Instead of returning to her place, she faced the bench, her voice remaining calm. "Before I sit down, Your Honor, I would like to formally challenge the fine issued earlier this morning." Keller visibly recoiled, as if startled. "Do you want to reopen that matter?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied. "You stated that religious symbols were not permitted in your courtroom. However, unless this courtroom is functioning under martial law, the First Amendment remains applicable." Her tone was measured. She did not need to raise her voice. In County of Allegheny versus ACLU, the Supreme Court underscored the requirement for government institutions to maintain neutrality rather than hostility towards religion. Prohibiting a small cross pendant, particularly from an individual who is not testifying or speaking to the court at that moment, does not represent neutrality. The action appeared as targeted suppression, and the gallery had gone completely still. Alana advanced 1 foot. Additionally, there was no written policy displayed, no public signage indicating the ban, and no prior warning provided. I am found without citation, without precedent, and without any attempt to verify my intent or role in the proceedings. Keller adjusted in his seat. His face had lost some of its typical composure. One could observe something stirring behind his eyes: calculation, doubt, perhaps even shame. Are you suggesting the court violated your rights? He inquired. Alana remained motionless. I am not making accusations. I am presenting established facts. I request the fine be rescinded, and the court record should indicate that this incident transpired outside established protocol. The prosecutor glanced up momentarily, then resumed, looking down. The bailiff's hands were now clasped before him, his jaw tense, and his posture more formal. Keller hesitated before replying. He fixed his gaze on her for a prolonged, intense period. Then he announced, "The fine is withdrawn." This wouldn't be documented. Alana offered a brief nod. "Thank you, Your Honor." She pivoted and proceeded to her place with composure. Murmurs arose once more. However, this time, they weren't filled with uncertainty. Instead, they conveyed interest and deference. A woman seated behind her silently asked another, "Who is she?" Alana remained uninvolved. She simply took her seat, retrieved her notebook, and gently opened it to a fresh page. The judge, for the first time that morning, seemed to be truly contemplating. His movements became more deliberate. He examined the files with greater attention. The issue he's ignited by the fine for the necklace had escalated. It had become something more significant. The prosecutor spoke quietly to the bailiff, who acknowledged with a nod and jotted a note. The shift was noticeable. Court reconvened. Several more cases were heard. However, the usual flow was disrupted. The observers were no longer focused on the legal charges. Their gazes repeatedly returned to Alana Merriweather, the woman who had corrected a judge without raising her voice. 30 minutes elapsed. Then, unexpectedly, Judge Keller called for a brief recess. He rose and exited through the side door silently. Alana remained seated. The bailiff approached her slowly. "Mom," he said, softer than previously, "may I pose a question to you?" She turned her head slightly. "Of course. Did you anticipate that occurring? Regarding the fine? Concerning everything?" Alana emitted the slightest laugh through her nose. "No, I was unaware of that, but I wasn't willing to ignore it." The bailiff touched the back of his neck. "I've been here for 8 years," he said. "Never seen him back down like that." "He's not a bad man," she said softly. "But power without accountability is dangerous," he agreed. It wasn't a matter of obligation, but comprehension. Further down the hall, 2 court reporters spoke quietly. The younger one appeared visibly shaken. She was familiar with every case, reciting them easily. "Lawyer?" one asked. "Yes, from Harvard. Can you believe that?" She attended to support her cousin and unexpectedly challenged the judge. The courtroom observers expressed disbelief. However, Alana felt no sense of triumph. She found no pleasure in undermining someone. Her purpose wasn't to shame Keller. She simply sought justice. When it was lacking, she created it herself, carefully and deliberately. Yet, a subtle shift began to appear in Judge Keller's gaze. Upon his return to the courtroom, Judge Keller seemed altered. His posture lacked its previous rigidity. He appeared unchanged in stature, simply quieter. No longer seemed a man attempting to maintain authority, but rather someone attempting to grasp how he relinquished it without awareness. He took a seat, adjusted his glasses, and proceeded to the next case. Even his voice had diminished in tone. It was subtly altered, almost imperceptible to an ordinary observer, yet Alana recognized it. She had witnessed this previously. Men in positions of influence struggling with a reality they resisted acknowledging. that they had transgressed a boundary, and someone unanticipated had retaliated. As the courtroom emptied and people moved towards the exit, Keller remained seated on the bench, his gaze fixed forward. Alana collected her belongings and was nearing the door when she heard him call out, "Ms. Merriweather." She paused and turned, her face showing no emotion. He rose from his seat and descended the steps deliberately, as if considering each one. "I'd like a word, if you're willing." The bailiff seemed uneasy, questioning whether this was a directive or a private inquiry. Alana offered a subtle nod, then turned to Deshawn. "Give me 5, she murmured to him. Keller refrained from escorting her into chambers. They remained just outside the vacant courtroom, maintaining enough distance for some discretion, yet remaining visible. He cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." Alana didn't reply. Not yet. She allowed him to formulate his thoughts. "I formed an assumption," he proceeded, "an inequitable one, regarding your intentions, regarding your position. I was mistaken," she responded gently, but without resentment. He lowered his gaze. "That's the difficulty, isn't it? One shouldn't need to be." Another pause. "I have dedicated 32 years to that bench," Keller stated, "and I have valued order, structure, neutrality. But you help me understand, occasionally what we consider neutral is simply convenient for those already in power." The statement impacted him more profoundly than anticipated. Alana simply looked at him, maintaining steady, respectful eye contact. There was no trace of ego, only honesty in her silence. "I don't expect forgiveness," he stated, "but I will say this. I won't forget today." Alana offered a slight nod. "That's all I hoped for." She prepared to leave, but he called out to her one last time. "If you're ever back in Murfreesboro, I'd be honored to hear you argue again." That element genuinely surprised her. "I hope not to need to," she replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. They both understood the unspoken meaning behind her words. The sun had risen higher, and the heat was intense. Deshawn stood near the sidewalk, looking at his phone. He brightened when he saw her. "What is that?" he asked, astonished. Alana shrugged, retrieving her keys from her purse. "Just a small civics lesson." "Seriously, you confronted a judge. In his home." She gave him a look. "Don't make it sound heroic. I didn't go there to fight. I want to hear what he had to say." When someone attempts to diminish your importance for reasons related to your identity, you face a choice: remain silent or voice your perspective. Deshawn leaned against her car, nodding slowly. "I swear, if I didn't know you better, I'd say you rehearsed that," I remarked. She laughed. "I didn't, but maybe I should start writing it down." At that moment, a local reporter from the Murfreesboro News-Journal approached, holding a voice recorder and a notebook. "Ms. Merriweather?" Alana turned. "I observed what unfolded. Our readers would likely appreciate hearing your perspective. Would you consider an interview?" She looked at Deshawn, then returned her gaze to the reporter. "Let me consider that." The reporter offered her a card and stepped back. "You prompted considerable thought today. Such occurrences are infrequent in court." As I walked toward the car, Deshawn remarked, "They will discuss this, you know." Alana shrugged again. "Let them." However, what transpired outside the courtroom held equal significance. As Alana and Deshawn arrived at his apartment complex on the west side of Murfreesboro, his phone was constantly buzzing. Calls, texts, and even direct messages flooded in. A cousin in Chattanooga had already learned the news. A friend from high school had sent a screenshot of a local news blog displaying the headline: "Attorney silently dismantles courtroom bias. Judge withdraws fine, dismisses case." Deshawn looked at her, his eyes wide. "It's already on the internet?" Alana offered a small smile. "I mentioned to you, people discuss events, particularly when expectations aren't met." She did not seek recognition. Not currently. Not in the past. However, there were occasions when being noticed wasn't a decision. It was a consequence of acting correctly when the option of remaining unnoticed wasn't available. Afterward that evening, she was at her kitchen table, drinking tea, the small cross necklace still on her collarbone. Her inbox contained numerous messages, some from familiar people, others from unknown individuals. Several legal blogs had already published summaries. A user on Twitter had shared a clip from the live stream, adding the caption, This is how you correct injustice, without ever raising your voice. However, Alana wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was considering a statement from Judge Keller. What we often consider neutral is simply convenient for those already wielding the authority. That observation resonated with her. She recalled her childhood, holding her grandmother's hand during evening church service. The pastor's words resonated. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is not shout. It's stand. Initially, it seemed like a poetic statement. Now it felt genuine. The following day, she returned to her position at the nonprofit office in Memphis. Her colleagues did not alter their behavior toward her. There were no celebratory balloons or enthusiastic applause. Instead, one of the interns presented her with a file and requested she review a housing complaint by noon. She appreciated the normalcy of it. Information still circulated, even without her direct involvement. A week later, she received a call from the Middle Tennessee State University Law Department. They were planning a community forum concerning courtroom ethics and bias, and a member of their board had recommended her as a speaker. She nearly declined. Nearly. Then she recalled the courtroom, the shift in people's gaze when they recognized her as an individual, and how many others remained voiceless, awaiting someone to advocate for them. Consequently, she consented to participate in the forum. 14 days later, a pastor from a church in Smyrna contacted her. He requested that she address their youth group regarding the law, its true meaning, its protective function, and how it can be applied equitably if individuals understand how to ensure its accountability. She accepted the invitation. She continued to agree, not due to enjoying the focus, but because the narrative was no longer solely hers. It belonged to all who had ever occupied the rear of a courtroom and considered, "They won't hear me." She had never shared this with Keller. However, that day had also altered her. She frequently reflected on him. She questioned whether he retained that moment within his memory as she did. If he ever observed someone in his courtroom differently afterward, perhaps with increased consideration, perhaps with a touch more humility. She hoped so. One Friday afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she noticed an envelope affixed to her door. It bore no name and no return address, only her name typed neatly. Inside was a brief note that read, "Ms. Merriweather, I've revised the courtroom conduct guidelines. Religious attire or symbols, unless disruptive, will no longer be penalized." That was all. There was no apology. No signature appeared beyond the initials. Yet it was sufficient. She folded the note and placed it within her grandmother's Bible. Alana Merriweather didn't seek recognition. She desired equity. Certain narratives briefly capture attention before fading. Others resonate deeply, altering perspectives, even without direct interaction with the individual who initiated that change. For Alana Merriweather, that courtroom moment represented not a culmination, but a segment within a more extensive narrative. A narrative encompassing decisions largely unseen by others. For instance, staying up all night to assist a tenant contesting an unlawful eviction. Dealing with late-night calls from worried mothers whose sons were detained without bail. Or traveling 3 hours to a courthouse in Jackson simply to observe a judge who was reported to be unfairly treating defendants with limited financial resources. She made no introductions. She simply observed, documented her findings, and waited for discernible trends to emerge. When questioned about her composure and restraint in the face of disrespect, she consistently replied, "I know what I carry." She didn't need to demonstrate its weight to show it was heavy. That courtroom didn't alter her. It simply reinforced why she selected this profession initially. Not for recognition, not for retribution, for respect. She had no desire to embarrass Judge Keller. She aimed to make him consider. And in that, she was successful. Some time passed, and during a talk with a group of teenage girls at a public charter school in Memphis, one of them asked, "Weren't you the woman who spoke directly to the judge and caused him to appear mistaken?" Alana responded with a smile. "I didn't speak directly to him. I spoke with purpose. And I didn't cause him to appear mistaken. I offered him an opportunity to reconsider." The girls seemed surprised. "Isn't that essentially the same thing?" Alana replied, "Not in the slightest." Several of the girls chuckled, but a few seemed to take her words to heart. Those were the ones she intended to reach. She continued, "The goal isn't to win arguments. It's to win ground, so the next person doesn't have to fight the same fight." That resonated with them, just as it resonated with her. She understood her story might disappear from news feeds. The tweets, the blogs, the clipped videos, they'd all be lost eventually. But someone would remember. Someone in the gallery who witnessed that moment unfold. Someone who'd felt invisible that day and walked out feeling a little stronger. That was sufficient. Some individuals enter a space seeking attention. Others, like Alana, enter, communicate with precision, and leave a lasting impact. The gold cross remained a daily adornment. She would be prepared again if another courtroom attempted to challenge its presence. For invariably, someone will attempt to diminish you to align with their expectations. And equally, a decision will always present itself, to diminish or to stand, to speak or to allow silence to convey your message. She elected to stand, with insight, not with empty words, not with arrogance, but with a clear objective. And that's what caused people to recall, not that she achieved victory, but how she achieved it. If this narrative resonated with you even slightly, if it prompted thought, emotion, or introspection, then please don't keep it private. Subscribe, distribute it, and help spread it. You never know when your steady voice might be the one that transforms the atmosphere. In a park, she performed a life-saving act for someone she didn't know. 3 hours passed, and then 5 high-end automobiles arrived at her residence. The subsequent events rendered her utterly stunned. 20 years. That was the duration of Denise Lattimore's service to that hospital. She wasn't simply a nurse, she was the nurse. The one they consulted when situations became critical. The one who eagerly accepted the less desirable shifts. Holidays, weekends, overnight assignments. Denise was consistently present. And then, abruptly, she ceased her service. The electronic message arrived at 6:42 a.m. While she was sipping her first cup of coffee, her shift wasn't supposed to start until 7:30. There was no meeting, no call. Just a subject line that read position status update. She clicked it and read, "We regret to inform you that due to internal restructuring, your position has been terminated effective immediately. Your final paycheck will be deposited by the end of the week. We thank you for your years of service." That was it. No signature, no explanation. Denise watched the screen, anticipating additional information. A follow-up, a phone number. Anything, nothing. She blinked, shut the laptop, and remained still. Her daughter, Mecca, was still asleep upstairs. The last thing Denise desired was for her to awaken and observe her mother falling apart before 7 a.m. Denise placed the coffee mug in the sink and stood for a full minute with her hands braced on the counter. She didn't cry. Not yet. She grabbed her keys, slipped on her running shoes, and left a note on the table. Went for a walk. "Be back soon. Love you." She didn't even bother to change out of her scrubs. She walked out the door and headed for Avondale Park, one of the oldest in Birmingham. It was quiet this time of morning. Just a few regulars walking their dogs, a jogger here and there. Denise wasn't sure what she was doing. She hadn't planned this walk. She hadn't planned anything. A weight settled in her chest, a feeling she needed to process. The phrases from the email echoed in her mind. "We regret to inform you." She considered it harsh, not just the dismissal, but the moment it occurred. Her daughter had recently begun her studies at Miles College. Tuition payments were approaching, and Denise had been striving to manage every dollar to cover expenses. There had been no prior notice. No meeting, no warning, simply a formal, impersonal message. She walked until her calves ached. She located a bench overlooking the small lake and sat down. Her phone vibrated. It was Mecca. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" It read, "Didn't hear you leave." Denise looked at the message. She began to type a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just needed air. Love you." She set the phone down and leaned back against the bench. The sky was a gentle, early blue, the kind of color that could make you momentarily forget how difficult life can be. "I gave them everything," she murmured, not realizing she had spoken aloud. To anyone else observing, She appeared like just another woman taking a morning walk. But internally, Denise was falling apart, not solely due to the job loss, but from the silence that followed. No one from the hospital contacted her. No one sent a message. 20 years, and not a single farewell. She rubbed her eyes. She wouldn't cry in a park, but something within her altered right then. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was grief. Perhaps it was anger disguised in a gentler form. For the first time in a long time, Denise felt still. Not okay, just still. Then she heard it. A sound. Quick, sharp, like someone hitting the pavement hard. She turned her head. A man had fallen near the trail, just beyond the row of hedges. He was maybe in his late 50s, face down on the ground, motionless. People looked, but no one moved. But Denise did. Denise didn't hesitate. Her body kicked into gear before her mind even caught up. She rose quickly, running towards the man prone on the asphalt. As she approached, the heat of the pavement was noticeable, along with the odor of sweat and a metallic tang. She wasn't sure if it was blood or fear. He remained still. "Sir?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me?" There was no response. Several individuals had paused at a safe distance. No one advanced. She carefully turned him over, observing his chest for signs of life, his neck for a pulse. His complexion was ashen. A bluish tint was appearing on his lips. Denise placed her fingers on the side of his neck. She felt nothing. "Call 911," she shouted without looking up. Someone mumbled, "Already did," but it seemed unimportant. She began counting seconds. She tilted his head back, checking his airway. Then she leaned in, delivered 2 quick breaths, and started compressions. 1, 2, 3. Her hands moved as if she's done this many times before. But this wasn't a training dummy. This was real. This was a matter of life or death. An audience observed, whispering and recording with their phones. However, their presence was insignificant. It was solely about her and him, and the sound of her hands striking his chest. "Come on," she murmured. "Don't you dare give up." He appeared to be in his mid-50s, dressed in a fitted black workout set, with a wedding ring and an Apple Watch. He seemed like the type of man who should be too healthy to collapse in public. But hearts are not governed by appearances. 1 minute passed, then 2. Denise felt sweat soaking through her scrubs, her hair plastered to her forehead. Her arms were sore, and her back throbbed. She continued working, focusing on her breathing. She compressed and counted. The silence was intense, a silence that felt like it was holding its breath. Then he gasped. The breath was weak and strained, but it was a breath. Denise moved closer. "Hey, are you with me?" His eyelids flickered. His chest moved a slight movement. Paramedics arrived less than a minute later. 2 of them rushed from the ambulance, carrying equipment. "I got him breathing," Denise said swiftly, stepping aside to allow them to take over. "No pulse when I arrived." I immediately began compressions. One of the medics acknowledged her. "Are you a nurse?" She replied I was. He didn't have time to inquire further. They proceeded with urgency. Oxygen mask, defibrillator pads, and vital signs assessment. Denise retreated, allowing the trained professionals to take charge. Her hands trembled. Someone behind her commented, "You saved him." She turned to see a woman, mid-30s, a jogger, visibly anxious. "You were incredible," the woman added. I didn't know what to do." Denise nodded once, then turned her eyes back to the man on the ground. She didn't need thanks. She just needed him to live. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, one of the paramedics looked at her and said, "You bought him time. That man's lucky you were here." Denise gave a tired half-smile. "I guess we both are," she said, watching as the ambulance pulled away. Sirens off. That was usually a good sign. The crowd began to thin, individuals returning to their daily lives as if nothing had occurred, as though they hadn't just witnessed a stranger die and return before their very eyes. Denise remained still for a brief moment, her heart racing. She then proceeded back towards the bench where it all began, sat down once more, and picked up her phone. Mecca had sent another message. "Mom, are you okay? Would you like me to bring breakfast?" Denise gazed at the message, her thumbs pausing above the screen. She then typed, "I'll be home soon." An event occurred. I'll explain when I return, she texted. She didn't know the man's name, didn't know if he'd survive the day. Her actions weren't for praise. It was a reaction. It was inherent. It was her purpose. Although her professional role had shifted, her identity remained unchanged. But the world had a peculiar habit of returning when you least anticipated it. Denise didn't realize how quickly that return would happen. 3 hours later, Denise was back home. Mud clung to her shoes, a souvenir from the park, and she was still wearing her scrubs. Mecca had prepared eggs and toast, placing them on the stove before heading to her shift at the daycare. The house was silent, punctuated only by the ticking of the wall clock, which consistently ran 5 minutes fast. Denise settled onto the front porch, cradling a chipped mug of green tea. She held it with both hands, attempting to find comfort in its warmth rather than dwell on the persistent tension beneath her ribs. Her thoughts were jumbled, with fragments of the incident in the park and recollections of the chilling email. She couldn't erase the image of his face, the initial stillness of his chest. She remembered the moment she felt a return of life under her hands. She had witnessed people flatline previously, but this felt deeply personal. She took a deliberate sip, then she registered the sound. Engines, several of them. She raised her head from her mug and blinked. 5 luxury vehicles approached her street, following one another. These weren't simply elegant cars. They were the type usually seen in magazines or on social media influencers' profiles. Among them was a Lucid Air, a Mercedes Maybach, a matte black Escalade reflecting the afternoon light, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, and trailing behind, a sleek Aston Martin that emitted a distinct, almost living sound. The vehicles decelerated and halted directly in front of her house. A peculiar sensation arose within her, not fear precisely, but a more profound feeling, a quiet prompting. This concerns the events that followed. The entrance of the Lucid opened. A man emerged, tall, wearing a sharp suit, untied, charcoal gray with a black shirt beneath. He was clean-shaven, silver highlighting his temples, his face bearing a tranquil expression as if possessing an eternity. It required a moment for recognition, but when he spoke, her breath halted. Ms. Lattimore, she rose deliberately. He advanced, his walk fluid and assured, yet unpretentious. "I believe you saved my life earlier today," he stated. At the park, Denise peered, trying to recognize him. Appearing calm, without any signs of distress, with his complexion restored and his eyes bright, he seemed almost transformed. But it was indeed him. You collapsed," she observed. "I did," he confirmed with a slight nod. "And I understand I wouldn't have recovered if it weren't for your assistance," she commented, setting down her mug. "How did you locate me?" He responded with a gentle, almost regretful smile. "A person with my resources usually has people managing specifics, but let's just say I was highly driven." She felt her throat tighten. "I didn't do it for any reason." "I know," he said swiftly. "That's precisely why I'm here." A younger woman, likely in her mid-30s, emerged from behind him, stepping out of the Escalade with a thick envelope and a small tablet. She remained silent, simply waiting. "My name's Roland Greaves," the man stated. "I have several companies, primarily in logistics and software. It's not a flashy business, but I've achieved success. Earlier today, I was approximately 30 seconds from not experiencing another sunrise." Denise adjusted her posture, her jaw moving. She wasn't certain of the direction this conversation would take, but it felt significant. "I want to speak with you," Roland stated. "Just 5 minutes. I'm not here to offer you a product or create a disturbance, but I have a debt I'm unsure how to resolve." She hesitated, remaining uncertain. She then said softly, "You're welcome to sit if you wish." He nodded once. "Thank you." They proceeded together to the porch. She observed the cars passing by. No one else emerged from the vehicles. As he settled into a chair, Roland surveyed the surroundings. "Pleasant place. It has a lived-in feel." "That's right," she replied. "Mecca's room is the one with the damaged blind." She explained that she had broken it while trying to chase away a wasp. He smiled. "Sounds like a spirited individual." "Is she?" A brief pause occurred. He then turned to her. "May I ask you a personal question?" She nodded. "Why didn't you wait for another person to assist?" Denise inhaled deeply, because if it were me, I would have hoped someone wouldn't wait. He observed his gaze downwards. He nodded slowly. Then, he looked in her eyes once more. I needed to hear that, but Roland hadn't come solely to thank her. He'd come with a proposition, one that would assess the extent of her trust in the kindness of strangers. Denise leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed over her chest. So, she said, maintaining a level tone, what precisely is this concerning? Roland moved closer, his elbows gently on his knees. You gave me 12 minutes of your time, and in those 12 minutes you didn't pause. You didn't inquire who I was or what I might provide. You simply defended me. Denise remained silent. She wasn't swayed by words. She's heard numerous eloquent presentations at hospital fundraisers and board meetings. This felt distinct, but she still didn't understand his direction. I established a company from nothing, he stated. It began in a garage in Baton Rouge. My first product was shipped from a rented storage unit. I navigated through losses, lawsuits, and everything in between. Now I have 500 employees and the ability to set my own guidelines. He paused. But despite all of that, I've never encountered someone helping me without expecting something in return. Not since my mother. That sort of generosity. It alters your viewpoint. Denise observed him intently. So, what exactly are you proposing, Mr. Greaves? I'm not seeking assistance. He raised a hand. Nor am I. I'm not attempting to provide a rescue. I'm aiming to make an investment. She frowned slightly. I researched your background. He continued. After my assistant located the incident report, I requested your employment history. Hope you aren't upset. Denise gave a humorless laugh. I'm accustomed to people investigating my affairs. This week has been filled with new experiences. Roland smiled. You were the most sought-after nurse in your department. There were notes from patients in the files about you. One woman mentioned that you were the reason she was able to get out of bed following her surgery. She also threw a shoe at me when I instructed her to perform her breathing exercises. He laughed. Nevertheless, she recalled you fondly. Then he retrieved something from his pocket. It was small, square, and black. He sat on the arm of her chair. A key fob. What is that? She inquired, looking at it but not touching it. It's for one of the cars parked outside, he said. The Lucid. Brand new. It's yours if you'd like it. Denise paused, studying it. Are you serious? She asked. As a second heart attack. He replied, only partially teasing. She didn't take the key. Why me? She questioned. I don't know many people like you, he stated plainly, and I've been thinking lately. I want to surround myself with people who move toward the problem, not away from it. People who act without needing a reason. He looked at her, his expression gentling. So I'd like to offer you a job. Denise blinked. He continued, I'm launching a new initiative. A wellness foundation linked to our company, focused on underserved communities, free clinics, training programs, and mental health outreach. Needs assistance. Funding is available, but we lack the personnel to establish it. We require someone with your expertise to help build it. Someone who understands the system's complexities and knows what individuals truly need. He paused. You would be director of clinical programs, responsible for setting the strategic direction and building your own team. The compensation is excellent, with full benefits. And you would have the autonomy to shape the foundation. She stared at him, speechless. Alternatively, he suggested softly, you're allowed to decline. I will still provide the vehicle. I will still express my gratitude. However, if you accept, I believe we have the potential to create something substantial. A pause settled between them, but it lacked tension. At length, Denise inquired, what would motivate you to entrust such a significant duty to someone you have only just met? Roland remained composed, stating, because occasionally, the instance in which someone rescues your life reveals that they are the individual you were meant to have known from the beginning. Denise found herself at a loss for words. She glanced at the key fob once more. Then, she looked at him. You'll give me time to think, take as long as you want. Just know this. I didn't come here to reward you. I came because I think the world needs more people like you making decisions that matter. But as soon as Roland left, Denise's heart remained unsettled. If anything, it pounded faster. because accepting meant stepping into something she wasn't sure she could manage, and that scared her more than losing a job ever did. That night, Denise remained restless. She sat on the bed's edge in the dimness, the faint light from the hallway offering little illumination. Her fingers followed the contours of the advanced key fob still on her nightstand, and used since Roland departed. It seemed overly substantial, overly swift, too remarkable to be genuine. She had experienced disappointment previously, not solely connected to the hospital. Years earlier, Mecca's father had pledged them security, only to disappear as debts accumulated. Denise understood from a young age to be wary of smiles, even those that appeared gentle. However, this opportunity felt different. It wasn't charity, it was a chance, one she hadn't anticipated. Needing a moment to herself, she put on a hoodie, placed the key fob in her pocket, and went outside. The Lucid remained, parked silently beneath the streetlight, its design distinct, its paint rich and flawless like midnight. She opened the driver's side door, anticipating an alarm. There was none. The vehicle greeted her as if familiar with her. Within, the cabin remained still and quiet, the dashboard illuminated with a gentle hum. She refrained from starting the engine. Instead, she simply sat, her palms resting on the steering wheel, inhaling a scent reminiscent of fresh leather and potential. She didn't register Mecca until the passenger door opened. "Okay, Mom," her daughter stated, entering the car. "Who did you rescue? And what sort of James Bond operation were you involved in?" Denise looked up, surprised. "What are you doing awake? The porch light was on, and you weren't in your room." "That's code for Mom is spiraling." Mecca glanced around. "This car is insane," by the way. Denise sighed. "It was the man in the park. He found me." Mecca turned sharply. "What? How?" He's not just some guy. His name's Roland Greaves, owns like 3 companies. He offered me a job." Mecca's eyes widened. "Doing what?" "Building something. A clinic. A program. He wants me to run it." "Wait. He once met you, almost lost his life, and now wants you to lead his company's health division?" "That's the summary." Mecca reclined in the seat. "And you're presently in the car he provided. Because you haven't decided yet. I don't want to accept something I didn't earn." "Mom," Mecca said, looking at her, "you save his life. You deserve the air in this car." Denise remained quiet. "Look," Mecca continued, "I understand. You're apprehensive. This feels like an opportunity that's almost unbelievable. You always said, fear doesn't get to run the show. You told me that the night before my first recital. That was different." "No, it wasn't." Mecca's voice softened. "This might be the first time in your life someone sees your worth openly. Not after 10 years. Not when you're desperate. But right now. And you're hesitating because you're used to fighting for scraps." Denise turned to look at her. "You think I should take it?" "I think. Do not allow fear to guide your decision." They remained silent for a while longer. The following morning, Denise drove the Lucid. She drove slowly, not far, just a few miles down to a nearby diner, where she and Mecca used to eat breakfast when Mecca was little. She needed a place to think without feeling confined. While she drank her coffee, an older man in a corduroy jacket sitting at the counter gave her a polite nod. "Beautiful car outside," he said. Denise turned, feeling a little unsteady, still adjusting. "Can't complain about good fortune," he remarked, moving his cup. "You simply need to ensure you utilize it wisely." But Denise understood that blessings invariably carried a cost, and the subsequent action would necessitate her abandoning everything she believed about herself, to evolve into someone else. Assuming she possessed the bravery, Denise remained in her kitchen, her arms crossed, observing the document Roland's assistant had provided. It detailed the job description and compensation package. The title, Director of Clinical Programs, still felt unfamiliar, like something that belonged to someone else. The numbers on the salary line alone made her chest tighten. She'd always been modest, made her way on steady, honest work. Never dreamed of 6 figures, certainly not with benefits and a personal driver listed in the perks. It felt unreal, uncomfortable even, but not because it wasn't real, because part of her believed she didn't deserve it. Denise answered the phone, not to contact Roland, but to reach out to someone else, a name she hadn't spoken in years. "Hi, is this Bernardine Willis?" A moment of silence. Then a recognizable voice responded, "Yes, who is calling?" It was Denise. Denise Lattimore. They had worked together at Jefferson Medical when they were both assigned to the night shift. Another pause, then a surprised laugh. "Girl, are you kidding me? Denise? From 2A? I thought you disappeared. I was let go this week." The line was silent for a moment. "And you? You were excellent." "That's what I believed as well." Denise outlined the situation concisely. The collapse. The man. The offer. Bernardine expressed quiet disbelief. "And you're contacting me because?" "Because I harbor doubts. And because I fear I might not be adequate." Bernardine responded immediately. "Denise, the hospital never appreciated your value. We all recognize that. You mentored half those new employees while they rewarded positions to individuals who couldn't recall the crash cart protocols." Denise laughed once. "I recall. When someone recognizes your value and offers you the opportunity to influence things, embrace it." Denise felt a warmth behind her eyes. "And what if it fails?" she inquired. "Then you'll leave with your head held high, as you always have. But don't decline because you believe you'll be out of place. You're not. More than most." That night, Denise didn't pace the floor. She didn't overthink. She retrieved the contract, reviewed it completely, and then signed. The following morning, Roland contacted her. "I allowed you a few days," he stated. "You weren't required to have them," Denise responded. "My decision is made." A pause followed on his end, then a drawn-out breath. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." She continued, "However, I require one thing from you." "Anything." She clarified, "I don't want to be a token hire. I don't want you to showcase me as your feel-good project. If I am joining, I'm coming to work. I will build the team. I will call the shots." Roland's voice became serious. "That's precisely why I wanted you," he said. And with a chuckle, he added, "I'm not addressing you as sir." "Deal," he concluded. A meeting was scheduled for Monday. He would have his legal team finalize onboarding procedures. She would visit the campus they were assessing in Tuscaloosa, the location for the first community clinic. After she ended the call, Denise paused in the kitchen, her bare feet on the tile floor, as sunlight streamed through the blinds. She had just made what felt like the biggest decision of her life. It wasn't born of necessity, but of deliberate choice. Mecca appeared at the head of the stairs, still in pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "You're up early," she observed. "I have work to do." Her daughter addressed her. "Did you take it?" Mecca replied, "I did." Mecca smiled. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said. "I'm proud of me, too." However, Denise understood that this wasn't the conclusion. It marked the start of a life she never imagined achieving, and she was now entering it, not as someone pleading for a place, but as someone asserting her right to it. When Denise first passed through the double glass doors of the building in Tuscaloosa, the feeling wasn't one of intrusion. It felt like returning to a familiar place. The building wasn't elaborate, not yet. The flooring was concrete, the walls unadorned, and wires still protruded from the ceiling, but she envisioned it clearly. She saw the intake desk positioned to the right, a children's play area directly opposite, consultation rooms extending along the rear hallway, a location where care would not be a luxury. It would be commonplace. Roland entered, carrying rolled-up blueprints beneath one arm and a coffee in the other. He gave it to her silently. She smiled and accepted it. "Day one," he stated. "More like step one," she responded. During the subsequent weeks, Denise began her work. She sought out not only former colleagues, but also individuals who had been overlooked, underutilized, and undervalued. This included nurses, aides, translators, and even a former janitor who desired to learn administrative tasks. Denise possessed the ability to nurture potential, training those with the willingness to learn. Her focus wasn't constructing a clinic, it was cultivating a culture. Each morning, she drove the same car, a gift from Lucid Greaves, not to display it, but to recall the origins of her work. It was a reminder of that pivotal moment in the park, hands placed on a stranger's chest, desperately hoping to detect a heartbeat. After 6 months, the clinic quietly opened its doors, without fanfare or publicity, simply relying on patience. A woman accompanied by her 2 children, who had not received medical care in 3 years. a man with uncontrolled diabetes, a teenager seeking assistance with anxiety. Denise welcomed each individual as if they were old friends. There were no barriers of paperwork or procedure, just compassionate care. One afternoon, while she was revising intake protocols at her desk, her receptionist softly knocked on the open door and announced, "There's someone here requesting to see you." Without a name given, Denise entered the lobby and paused, visibly surprised. He was the man from the park. Roland had visited, sure, but this wasn't him. This was the man she'd knelt beside, whose chest she compressed until life returned. Dressed in a simple navy sweater and jeans, with a quiet smile that conveyed something deeper than words. "I never thanked you properly," he said. "You did more than enough." He walked over slowly, pulled something from his pocket. A small, flat velvet box. Denise shook her head. "If that's jewelry, I swear I'll toss it right back." He laughed. "No, it's not jewelry." She opened the box. Inside was a bronze medallion, etched with an emblem she didn't recognize. "It's from my mother's side," he said. "Passed down 3 generations. My grandmother gave it to my mom when she became the first black woman in her district to run a public health clinic." Denise's fingers closed gently around it. "I think she'd have wanted you to have it." She swallowed hard. "I'm not family." "You're exactly what family looks like," he said softly. "At least the kind that saves lives." Later that night, Denise sat on her porch again. Not with tea, with silence. The good kind. The kind that lets you breathe. The street was quiet. No more engines. No more questions. Just peace. Mecca stepped out, leaned on the railing beside her. "Long day?" she asked. "Best kind," Denise said. They sat together, watching the sky turn purple over the rooftops. After a long pause, Mecca said, "It's funny. What is? How you save a life, and somehow it ended up saving yours too." Denise didn't reply. She didn't need to, because she understood now. Some moments fundamentally alter everything. Not because they're dramatic or widely known, but because they reveal your true character when you are alone. And when you act from love, without any expectation of reward, sometimes life responds in an unexpected way. Should you find yourself in a situation where your efforts feel unseen and your work goes unrecognized, please recall this. Gratitude may not always be expressed openly, but it remains. And when it does reappear, it can be more significant than you could have foreseen. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who could benefit from hearing it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We have more stories similar to this that demonstrate the profound impact of a single positive decision.